Some significant developments have taken place in the world over the last few days and weeks, which must be watched and understood very carefully by anyone who has slightest interest in the international affairs. Since the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and especially after the end of the Cold War, the United States of America has enjoyed unprecedented power and hegemony in the world affairs. This power was shared only by its closest allies, the Western capitalist powers or the G7, which, according to Noam Chomsky, became the masters of the universe. And these masters of the universe did not hesitate to flaunt their muscles and unleash a war of terror on the entire planet, resulting in a seemingly never ending wave of conflict, violence, misery, and chaos. This had to stop. Writing uh, theses like the end of history would not change the divine laws. Every rise has a fall, and so it came, slow and steady, until it was too obvious and unstoppable. The so called unipolar international order came under threat with the rise of China and the resurgence of Russia. The West was too busy fighting its self created bogey of Islam, and by the time it recognized the new threat and wound up the war against Islam, it was too late, and China had already leapfrogged to a position of economic superpower, and Russia under Putin was becoming more and more assertive. The United States rightly recognized China as the major threat and did carry out some hard and soft measures to check the rise of China. But in my opinion, they seriously underestimated the power and resolve of Russia. They thought that they can choke Russia in Ukraine and then concentrate their energies against China. But as we see today, Ukraine is becoming more and more of a nightmare, especially for the European allies of the United States. While there may be many events in the last few years to show the erosion of US mastery of the world, in my opinion, a very significant event took place on 10th of March. For a common viewer, it may not be very spectacular, but in my opinion, it is symbolically very important. On 10th of March, the entire international media carried this photograph of former Foreign Minister and senior Chinese diplomat Wang Yi, flanked on both sides by the Dr. Mossad, Minister of State and National Security Advisor of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Admiral Ali Shamkhani, Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The news is that the two countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia, have agreed to resume diplomatic ties after a gap of almost 7 years. Again, countries do cut off ties and they do resume. There's nothing spectacular about that. But the geopolitical context surrounding this episode makes it significant. Saudi Arabia has been the leader of pro-Western camp in the Arab world and a dependable ally of the United States. A very close ally of the United States, shaking hands with a major enemy, under the aegis of its arch rival China speaks volume about the diplomacy of China and the statesmanship of Xi Jinping. Saudi Arabia seems to be slipping away. It is buying Russian diesel at a time when Russia is under Western sanctions, and it is willing to sell its own oil to China in yuan rather than dollar, threatening the supremacy of petrodollar. The timings of the declaration of Saudi-Iran uh, agreement is also very wisely orchestrated to match with the 14th National People's Congress, which gave unprecedented third term to Xi Jinping as President of China. And while the world was still grappling with the news, the triumphant, ever more confident Xi Jinping walks over to Russia in a sign of solidarity with his old friend Vladimir Putin and to rub salt on the wounds. It offered mediation in the Ukraine conflict. Just 3 days after the International Criminal Court has indicted Putin of war crimes. One thing is clear: the West, which has led the world for centuries, is in serious leadership crisis. There is not a single leader of international stature in the entire West, and this vacuum is being filled by the likes of Xi Jinping, Tayyip Erdogan, and Vladimir Putin. It's time for the international community to revisit their foreign policy alignments. The global transition of power is evident. Those who will not be able to align with the new ground realities will be left behind. I think this picture will be used in the coming days as a symbol of new international order. This picture is likely to haunt the West and Israel for years to come.